Evening, everybody. Thanks very much for coming in. I hope you're all safe and well, and welcome to our casual chat with our good friend, author, and investigator, Mark Ed. I always dread saying your second name wrong. I don't think I've got it wrong yet, but have I? Egerton.
Egerton, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's
how
because
it's
of
pronounced.
that's what kind of throws me. But every time I say it, you kind of mentally prepare yourself to say it the right way. Sarah says hi. So tonight, what we're talking about is investigations, basically. I know a lot of teams, groups prefer, us included, we sort of go at night time to a graveyard or an old church, castle, wherever, and hope that we're going to get something. And some go during the day. Not everybody goes during the day. It's more common at night time. And so I asked Mark to come in because he's done countless investigations and just to chat about, is there any difference between going during the day and at night? So thanks for coming in, buddy. It's always good to have you on. So investigations, daytime or nighttime? Do you think
Well, the
there's
thing
any?
that I always hark back to the fact that I've only ever seen one apparition in 40 odd years, and that happened at 2 o'clock on a summer's afternoon, in a room that was a little bit gloomy, but by no means dark. So no, I think that you can get paranormal activity in daylight hours or nighttime hours. I think it can be a little bit more difficult to ascertain. And one of the reasons why most paranormal investigations take place at night is purely because it's generally quieter. And if you're in a household street and you've got cars going by you and you've got dogs walking by and barking and things like that, it becomes a little less it becomes more difficult to control what's paranormal and what's perfectly normal. So and again, a lot of people sometimes say to me, well, if you do investigations at night, why do you turn all the lights off? And again, I was told by Peter Underwood and my own uncle Trevor that generally speaking, it's because if you sit in a darkened room and that, you seem to be able to pick up even the slightest thing, and your other senses are heightened. So although
Mhm.
your eyesight is your eyes do generally, even if you're in pitch black, your eyes do become accustomed to the dark, so that you can probably see a person sitting next to you, although you can't see their features, but you're aware that there's a shape moving near you. But you tend to find that in the when your eyes can't see, that your ears and your nose and your other senses are heightened. This can be particularly the case with people who've got psychic medium capabilities. They very often tell me that in the daylight, they actually close their eyes if they're communicating with spirit, and they say they can see them. Um, that's always difficult for me to get my head round because I can't. So, um,
Mhm.
as I said to you earlier, if some psychic medium says to me, Mark, you've got a spirit person behind you, I'm always saying, well, can you ask them to tap me on the shoulder or move something or give me some sign that I can see that I know that they're there. So mediums, from my experience, I would say 90% of them that I've encountered have been inconclusive, bordering on or fraudulent. But there are, I would say, 10% of the mediums that I've dealt with have come across with some information that they couldn't have possibly known or picked up. I know that a lot of people say that you can question people in such a way so that they will relate to it and think that you know things about them. But um, I've used a medium, um, June. She's been coming along to me. I've been doing these tours at Hinchinbrook House, as you know,
Yep.
and I've been some of the places there are particularly small, so I've taken a small group of people to the places and left the other people on the tour with a psychic medium, a psychic dowser, and the lady who did the artwork for my book, and they've entertained them while I've taken the other people away. And June Allman was, I went along to a reading with her in 2015. I was in about 50 then. But she told me things that I hadn't had a reading since I was 20. To be honest, I was very, very skeptical. But, she actually told me things that she couldn't have possibly known. And she actually told me that she felt she'd got my mother there with her, and described her in detail, even told me how she died. Told me I was going to be writing a book before I'd even, at that time it was just a little seed in my head. I hadn't actually made a start on it, so I hadn't discussed it with anybody in any detail. So how she would have known that, I have no idea, but she did. So yeah, I think you have to keep an open mind on these things, and as incredible as some of these psychic mediums say they are, I truly believe that some of them have genuine capabilities. And,
there is. I mean, hi Sarah, Joan, and Justin. As usual, mediumship. I've no disrespect to anybody. I've been to see quite a few spiritualist churches and what have you, and I think it is a kind of touchy subject, kind of 50-50, because, as you say, Mark, there are people out there who anybody can stand up and say, I'm a medium.
Yes.
Anybody can say it, but they need to back it up. And I think it all stems back to, obviously, to the Davenport brothers, way back when spiritualism first began. They were exposed, they were kind of big news at the time, and then they get caught faking it, and that blew the whole medium thing out the water, and it led to the introduction of platform mediums.
Well, I think what happened, Scott, was with mediumship, and I mean, spiritual churches and things, spiritualism basically developed in the USA, and when it arrived over here, it was such huge news. You have to remember that, lots of world wars and things, and a lot of people had lost loved ones and were in absolute grief, and so the thought of being able to connect with a loved one, a husband or wife or child that had been taken during the war, was quite appealing to a lot of people, and so much so that they desperately wanted to believe. So you've got the ingredients there for people whose intentions are to make money out of that. We're all there, and obviously during the Victorian era, a lot of these spiritualists that made global news were actually exposed and found to be fraudulent.
Yeah, there's Justin making I think we all stand back more to shamans, in the media term is more commonly being coined and phrased.
Yeah.
I think the medium, I might be wrong with this, I think the medium word actually just came from, was this person that could connect this world to the next, so they were kind of medium in between sort of person. To say, I've seen a lot of mediums, and I was kind of, on the fence, but many years ago, I used to attend the spiritual church. There was one particular night I decided, just, last minute decision it was, I went to this new one in a different town from where I lived. I'd never been there before. I never told anybody I was going. I think it started at 7 and it was about 6:30. I said, right, I'm going. Jumped in the car and went, walked in. I just sat down, knew nobody. The medium came on. She was a lady, maybe in her 50s, and she says, I want to come to the guy with the black jacket on and the glasses. And it was me. And she told me, you've got a daughter in the spirit world. She's been on your knees since she came in, and her name, she told me my daughter's name. Now, I'd never spoken to anybody. She also told me about, she says, you've got it's an ex-girlfriend, her name began with an A, and she passed over, not here, but in a different country. It was America, and it was a car crash, something to do with her breathing.
Yeah.
And it was bang on. I used to go with a girl called Alison who moved to America. She was driving home one night. She took an asthma attack at the wheel, and for such she couldn't get her inhaler or whatever, and she crashed and she was killed instantly. This woman knew. She described my gran, and she said, I've got a wee old lady here, grey hair and that. So, you know, that
Yeah.
could be anybody's grand, but the woman turned around and says, she's doing this. She says you identify with this. And when from when my gran got up to when she went to bed, she wore one of the old-fashioned aprons.
Yeah.
You know, and my gran was that skinny that the tie had wrapped around her twice.
Yes.
And she was always tying and until it used to drive us nuts. She just constantly fiddle with this thing. And we used to say, "Oh, man, will you leave it alone? It's tight." And so the woman says, she's doing this, and she says, "You'll know her by this." And that was me, because there's no way anybody could have known anything like that. And the woman was spot on. Hi, Gail. Just in another couple of comments, I'll pop up in a minute. The Victorian pictures where people were quickly getting shot, that was all faked. Definitely some people have the ability, I or some. It's hard to know who.
I've seen a lot of pictures of these Victorian spiritualisms with the sort of smoke and mirrors with pictures that appear to have spirits in, and there's all sorts of ways that they'd fake things to, you know, one knock for no, two knocks for yes, and they've got sort of devices set up so that they could move their foot and it would make a tapping sound somewhere in the building. As I said, there's a lot of people, and I think when you have that darkness and it focuses people's attention as well. If you do an investigation in broad daylight, it's very, very difficult sometimes to. I did one last week, as I told you, in Bedfordshire, a place called Flitik Manor Hotel, which has got a long haunted history to it. And basically, with hotels and pubs, generally speaking, their busiest times are on a Friday night or a Saturday night, which is when most of us do paranormal investigations, because we don't have to get up for work the next day.
It always seems to be the weekend, doesn't it? It's a weekend thing.
Yeah, because, you know, obviously many of us have to get up early for work the next morning. So finishing in a building at 3-4 in the morning and then having to get up for work 3 hours later is not good. So, but obviously hotels and public houses, the weekends are generally their busiest times. So, you know, we went and had a look at this hotel, and we went on a Monday, and we went from 11. They basically said we'll have guests checking out Monday morning at 10:30, and we won't have guests coming in that evening until sort of 3-4. So we went and did an investigation between 11 and 3, purely because that was a time when the hotel would have hardly anybody in it. Obviously, the more people you've got in it, the more chances you've got of contamination, and the more difficult it is to actually label something as paranormal. We picked up a lot of information by dowsing. Our next step now is to see if that can be verified. Very often we were dowsing, the lady dowses with a crystal pendulum, and we've had some extraordinary dowsing sessions, and we've had others that have been completely a load of rubbish, gobbledygook. In fact, I've got a theory that sometimes you can perhaps connect with a spirit that wants to play games with you and doesn't want to tell you the truth, or enjoys, a bit like you know, these phony mediums who don't really do it for the money. They just enjoy the sort of ego trip of you believing that they can do something that you can't. And I think you can probably get that in the spirit world. You'll get somebody that enjoys receiving attention and will tell you what you want to hear. So you have to sort of take whatever you get, document it. That's what we do. Get as much information as you can, names, dates, anything that can be verified. Now, with the internet, you know, and ancestry websites, it's not too difficult to, you know, go back 300 or 400 years. Going back any further than that is difficult. But, you know, there are records out there. So if you get names and dates, it's fairly straightforward to see whether or not they can be authenticated.
Well, that's where excuse me, I'm getting a wee thing in my throat, I don't know why. That's the we're just 2 weeks into starting. I sent you a couple of clips. We've started with Sarah that came up on it. Hi, Hugh. It's an estate, and it's about half an hour away from us. And this estate dates back to the original house was built between 1770 and 1773. That's kind of disputed. It's 280 acres. Sits out in the middle of nowhere. The nearest village is about 5 miles away. It was built. The original mansion was built for the Muir family, who back then were considered one of the wealthiest families there. They lived there, obviously, different generations lived there till from 140 years to 1903. And then the head of the family decided it was too expensive to live there, so they moved elsewhere. 1927, the Glasgow Health Board took it over and turned it into. And there's two different stories, and we're working on which one's true. One is, and I hate using this word, but they turned it into a mental institution for adults, and then it later became a care home. The other story is it was a mental institution for children, but either way, there was children that lived there.
Yes.
That stayed open till 1985, and then it closed down. In the early 90s, there was a couple of fires. The second fire devastated the building. Workmen went in, saved what they could, but unfortunately to rip quite a bit of the building out. Now we've done 4 investigations there. We've done one Friday night there. So there's 4 or 5 different buildings on this estate. It's massive. And there is what we believe was a mortuary and a children's hospice with a set of swings outside it. But in the main mansion, what's left that we done an investigation and we picked up, well, it was me, I was the only one, the girls were hearing, it was crazy, the girls were hearing what they described as a sharp intake of breath. K2 meter was going nuts, and the cat ball kept going off as well. Now, everybody's phone is in flight mode. There's no roads or anything. There's only one road goes round it inside. The entrance to the place is about a mile down the hill. There's 2 houses on the estate. So there was no chance of any interference. See, this place is literally in the middle of nowhere. The K2 meter was going off on command, basically. Every time I asked a question, it went up. The cat ball would go off as well. And then the EMF meter, I was sitting on the stair next to the EMF meter. The girls have said 3 or 4 times, "Did you hear that?" I never heard them take a breath, but they did. So I moved the EMF meter and it went to red. Now, I'd been sitting beside this meter mark for about 10 minutes and nothing. I moved it over and it went to red immediately. And then I heard this woman's whisper. I've sent it to 11 different people, including yourself. They've all came back and verified that it's not through the app. It's not through any app. It is a voice that's right next to me. We're trying to work out what this lady says. Jim Martin, who we're getting tomorrow night, he ripped it apart and he came back to me the other day saying, the lady's asking you is your light better? And he said, if you watch your footage, you move that meter, and then shortly after it lights up, and then you get that question coming, is your light better? So he says, I sent you that footage. What did you make it?
Well, to be honest, when you just see a piece of basically blind footage, this is why I think it makes a big difference if you're actually present there and you can sense the atmosphere of the place. And again, this is one of the reasons why I think that, generally speaking, paranormal investigations and vigils are carried out in the dark, because your other senses are heightened. And I think that it's very difficult to actually explain, but some people do have this form of sixth sense, or if you like, psychic ability. And I think the other interesting thing is to actually ask ourselves whether we're actually communicating with some person from the past who has expired, or whether we're communicating with something non-intelligent, that they're left behind. And I guess I'm talking here people's spirit, people's soul. The interesting thing for me is every society in the world accepts that we have a spirit, a soul, a life force. It's not something that we can physically see,
Mm-hmm.
an organ, like a heart or a lung, which you can quite clearly see when a person expires that that organ is no longer functioning, and it will eventually rot away and die. But with the spirit and the soul, this is getting back to stone tape theory stuff and that. Can it embed itself into a property or a place? And can some people, bearing in mind that the top scientists in this country, top psychiatrists, etc., acknowledge that still 50% of our brain, we don't know what it does. So it's possible that some of us, and this could be what most of us say, oh, they've got psychic abilities, can tap into this and either tap into the past or pick up remnants of information that have been recorded within the fabric of a building.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps they have the ability with their mind to not time travel themselves physically, but time travel mentally and go back to a period of time in the past. Um, if you read all these Einstein's theories of relativity, it gets a little bit too heavy for me, to be quite honest. I'm not really scientifically minded. But, what I can tell you is it does fall under this umbrella that we call the paranormal. We can't explain it, but there are things that happen that defy any logical explanation. So you have to label them paranormal. And you'll get a body of people that say, oh, it's a load of rubbish, it doesn't exist. But there's many of us out there, myself included, who've witnessed it ourselves. And, we're rational people, we're not stupid. And even with the most skeptical head on, I've come across things that have happened to me on investigations or information that we've picked up on investigations that, when researched, proves to be accurate. And so, how does that happen? How do you explain it? I don't know. And that's really why I've been interested in it for so long. I'm not really interested in it because I want to go out and find something incredible and prove to the rest of the world it exists. I've sort of given up that long ago. And you'll talk to some people and they'll actually say, oh, you imagine it, you're talking in a load of rubbish, or basically you're a liar. And so that's not very nice when people call you a liar. So I tend not to really bother too much. I just do it for my own interest. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you look at why we all do it, it's because it's fun and it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like all human beings, we're naturally curious. Nothing makes us more curious than death. We're told that one thing is certain when we come into the two things, death and taxes or whatever. But then there are people that say, well, is death the end of it? It's the end of what we perceive here on Earth, but is there something afterwards? And
Mm-hmm.
I think there is, I really do. But
Oh, there is definitely. I mean, this location, we've been there. I think it's about four investigations, and every time we went, this place hasn't disappointed us, and it's got the
yeah,
whole team hooked. We took another team with us on Friday night there,
yeah,
and we left them alone, do their own thing. They get very, very little. We
yeah,
were in the basement where we got very, very little. I
yeah,
think they came to me went up once and that was it. So we went back up to the staircase. And after we sort of settled down and got going, the meter was going, the EMF meter was going again. And I remember you saying before, Mark, that if you get something, if you get a meter or whatever going for maybe 30, 40 seconds, more than 30, 40 seconds, then possibility is something. We had our meter going for 18 minutes.
Yeah. If you've got something that's reacting on demand for that period of time, I would say probably a minute as a guideline, then I think you can rule out that it's just a rogue text message coming from the building on your left to the building on your right, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're out in the middle of nowhere. But you also, as some people have pointed out, have to accept that we can pick up electronic signals from places like Mars via satellites. So even if we're in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in the middle of where you are in the Scottish Highlands, where there's no house, there are still signals bouncing around and things like that. But the likelihood of being somewhere remote like that and interacting with you for that amount of time, I'll tell you what I would, and this is something that I've developed in probably 5 years. If I am convinced that I'm dealing with something that's paranormal and I've got an intelligent entity or whatever you wish to call it communicating with me, I will, and you are able to ask questions and you're able to solicit a reply, whether it's through a medium, through dowsing, through glass work, or however. The question that I always put to it is, are you able to show yourself to us? That's quite an interesting one. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if they say no, I say, are there other spirits in this building here with you? And if I get a yes, I basically say, would you be able to uh, accompany us this evening and introduce us to some more of them? Um, and that's something that a lot of people don't really think of doing. But
Oh,
ultimately, the
ring.
utopia would be to say, can you appear for us? And them to say yes, and then they appear. It's never happened to me yet, but that's ultimately what we'd like, isn't it?
That's what you want. Just before I come and see this comment, just you're saying asking the spirit something. I asked the spirit, just what you says about there being other spirits there. We believe there's a little boy meant to roam. There's a photograph somewhere that was taken that shows him at the window. I've never seen this photograph to date, but I asked the spirit, is there more than one spirit here? And
Yeah,
it went up to yellow. And so I said, well, what I did was I said, well, I'll count. And when I get to the number, make the box. I know a lot of people say make the device or make the meter. I tend to say make the box because my way of thinking is you could be dealing with a spirit for 200-300 years ago
yeah,
who doesn't know what a K2 meter, but you say a
no, no,
box,
yeah,
you know. I say, so when I get to the number, can you make that box go to yellow?
yeah,
And so I started counting 1, 2, 3, nothing. I says 4, and it went straight to yellow.
yeah,
And so I asked it again. I says, so is there 4 spirits here? And
yeah,
again, it went straight to yellow. Sarah saying, no, we were asked to go back upstairs. That's right. We were in the basement and we had the necrophonic on, and the girls were hearing to was go upstairs. See that I went to check in another team when this happened, and I
yeah,
came back. The girls told me we were told through the necrophonic to get back up to the stairs, go upstairs, and that's what we did. And that's when
yeah,
we got a lot of activity happening. The other thing, the first investigation we done, the other weird thing was that the camera turned itself off. We have a locked off camera that we used, and we always use it. We just press record, stick it in a corner, and forget about it. I
yeah,
checked the footage the following day, and after 6.5 minutes, it cut off. The battery was 3/4 full, and it
yeah,
was after the 6.5, roughly just after about 6, 7 minutes, that things started to happen. Noises
yeah.
started to be heard, all different bits and pieces. So I thought that was quite strange that the camera would just turn itself off.
Yeah, that's something that I've experienced before, and battery drainage is relatively common, and ultimately that's why K2 meters first came into being. I can remember when they first came out and were used in paranormal investigations, and I found them really, really helpful because obviously we're going back quite a few years now, where before Wi-Fi and things like that, and so. There is evidence, going right back to the Victorian times, that electricity does play a part in what we call the genesis of a ghost or a spirit. That electrical levels do change, and much the same as we press a button to undo the lock on our cars. Basically, that's a signal that's being transmitted. So if you've got some form of spirit and there's electricity or electrical phenomena attached to it, then why can't it turn off electrical devices or turn them on? Why shouldn't it drain batteries and things like that? So that's something that is not uncommon on paranormal investigations, particularly battery drainage.
It was annoying, And to get back to what you're saying, Mark, about when the people prefer to do in the dark because obviously your other senses kick in.
Yeah.
Jennifer, our American team, she prefers audio to video.
Yeah.
So she'd listened to it a day or two after that first investigation, and she says, you have no idea the amount of stuff he's caught. So what I started doing was I put the headphones on and I just lay in my bed in the dark and listened. And the amount of stuff that I picked up on, just doing it that way, and it stings when I watch the video back. There's one bit in, we were right next to what used to be it was a lift. Obviously it's ruins now, but there was in the background, you could hear a couple of the team talking, but in the background there was a mechanical kind of sound, and at the end of it there's a very, very faint ping. Remember the old lifts you used to get with the floor would ping when you got to the floor?
Yeah.
That's what it's like. But none of us react to this sound, and it's quite clear.
Yeah.
When we listen back to it.
Yeah. It's interesting because as well you have to remember that like dogs can hear things that we can't. Their sense of hearing is much keener, which is why a lot of people will refer to how their pets react in a supposedly haunted house. I can remember Hinchinbrook, which obviously I've spoken to you about. When I was a boy, I was friendly with a guy called Craig Rendell, whose father was the caretaker, and they had a large Alsatian dog called Sabre. And very often his dad, Ted, would say, you boys go and lock up, and give us this great big bunch of keys to go out to the school. And obviously we'd go to the house as well. When you got to the house, that dog would not go up the stairs. It stood at the bottom of the stairs, all the hackles on the back of it, and it would sort of growl sort of deeply. But if you tried to pull it up the stairs, it would resist. There was something there that basically made it feel uncomfortable with going up those stairs, to the point where even if you cajoled it and pulled it, it's quite a big dog anyway as a male Alsatian. So, so you wonder, can it see something or can it hear something that you can't?
Mm-hmm.
So, because obviously we know that their hearing is much more attuned than ours. Probably their sight is too. So.
It's the same as young children, babies. Martin's saying that he likes to be blindfolded. It hides his experience, he cuts it, and then he puts after the paranormal, that is. In case he told me he meant something else. But it does heighten your experience. And I found I wasn't blindfolded, I was just lying in the dark in my bed with headphones on. And it was remarkable, the things I heard. There was two things I was wanting to ask you. I mean, this place is amazing. We're going to be there for weeks, and we're lucky enough that we'll get the full permission of the residents because it is a private estate. Two things I wanted to. The first whispered voice, it was only myself that heard it. So we done an investigation on Friday night, and we done it at the bottom end of the estate, where used to be the old swing park. The same woman's voice comes through. We heard the second investigation. We heard the same woman. But it was as if she was more in the background in the distance. Friday night, she came through again.
Yeah.
But down at the swing park, which is on the other end of the estate.
Yeah.
Is it any idea why that would be? Why she would come through to me at the mansion house and then she would pop up at the swing park, basically, for want of a better word?
we was having a conversation. It was like, are you saying as if she's attached herself to you, or she's
This is what we don't know, because I listened to the recording back for Friday night. I listened to it over and over, and so that's the same. That's the same woman's voice, and it's not through the app.
yeah.
It's it's roundabout us, and it's the same woman. So, well, why
I
would
mean,
she come?
it could be quite as simple as if it is a spirit, she likes and she trusts you. As simple as that. I've had a lot of investigations where, in a lot of cases, you try anything, and I've had a lot of investigations where we're calling out, and you won't get any response to a male voice, but you will a female, or vice versa. So,
Mhm,
if you've got one particular person in your group who calls out and you're getting nothing, it can be an idea to ask someone else in the group who's a different sex to try calling out. And it's like, I'll talk to you, but I'm not talking to them.
mhm.
But ultimately, if you're getting information as you are, and it appears to be the same woman, what I would do is try to focus on getting names and dates
That's
and things
exactly
things
that's
that can be.
exactly what we're doing.
Yeah,
It did,
if you get names and dates, they're things that can be authenticated, and that adds a hell of a lot more credibility to it.
mhm.
If you can provide stuff like that, and I've had one or two investigations where we've picked up an awful lot of information, including names and dates, and they have actually checked out, and the information we've been given is documented evidence that it's correct. I've had others where uh, what we've got is complete gobbledygook. It doesn't sort of check out. It doesn't do anything. So I'm wondering. Plus, as well, I mean, the thing as well, Scott, that you have to take into account, and I know this sounds a bit vague, but if you're sitting down and you're looking at a device and you're wanting something to communicate through it for you, and there's three or four of you there, um, you've got the uh, is it telekinesis? You're sitting there wanting something to do something. Is it possible that three or four of us there can have the energy, psychic energy in our brains, or to make that happen? We're not dealing with anything at all that's dead or expired.
Mhm.
We just basically, it's still paranormal because we can't explain it, but it is another possibility that should never be overlooked. I think on a previous talk with you, I highlighted how at the Peterborough Museum, we put a small uh, a ball that glows in the dark onto the floor of an operating theatre. And we all laid down on our bellies. Our heads were no more than 2 feet from it. And we asked if there was a spirit people there was to move that ball. That ball did a circle about the size of a human head, and it was quite a shock to see that movement. But then,
Mhm.
the thought that was going through my mind is, did the spirit of somebody that had died on this operating theatre in this room move it, or somebody associated with this building? Was it their spirit that moved it, or were we moving it basically kinetically? That's another area that needs to be explored further.
So that's the thing. There's
Yeah.
that many um, different questions. Just before I come to Martin's comment, we got some names through, various names, children's names as well, and we got we asked her, this lady was a nurse, came back, she'd been a nurse. The unfortunate thing is the records for the hospital side, they're sealed in Mitchell Library in Glasgow for 75 years. So
Yeah,
the hospital shut in 1985. So
yeah.
we can't get to any of the records to check out, if any names tie in. But we are looking. The girls they're all doing their research. So looking at various.
Well, if you can get dates, what you can do on these various websites now is you can get census records. So if you've got a nurse working in a hospital and you know the date that she's there, you know that if it's in recent years, last 200 odd years, that there's going to be a census. So you can very often get census records. If you've got a name and a date on a census record, generally speaking, there's occupation as well. So there are ways and means that you can get that. And I'm not saying that censuses that were carried out 200 years ago were entirely accurate, but it's a starting point. So these websites that you can join now, where you can check back ancestry records and things, you can sort of tie that up with birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, and census records. So if you've got a name and you've got a date, the chances are, especially the further back you go, the chances of that person living a great distance from the site of where they worked are pretty minimal, because if you're going back more than 200 years, they wouldn't have a car. So they're probably going to be working. Yeah. So this is why I don't like the word ghost hunting. I like the word paranormal investigator, because when you investigate the paranormal, it is like a criminal case. You look at all the information, you look for other sources of information like these records, and you're looking for evidence, basically. And if you haven't got conclusive evidence and you dismiss that because there isn't conclusive evidence, and you keep tapping away, what you're left with at the end is possibly the truth. So, doing a paranormal investigation is not too dissimilar from doing a criminal investigation. You're doing the same.
You need to look at everything, and this place is it's thrown up all different bits and pieces. And we had planned just to do it for a month, but the way it's going, we're going to be there a couple of months. But we are blessed enough that we've got all the residents' permission to come and go as we please. But I'm going to leave some of the comments. Man said, I think sometimes they realise they're communicated, then they want to see more. They haven't finished, and they can check to see what you're doing as well. That'll be about the ladies. I don't understand. It's definitely the same lady that's there. Sarah, she's saying, I personally think she's following the children to make sure they don't talk. We get a feeling that the second investigation, there was kind of like adults trying to hold the children back for talking. It might just be the way we were filming, not sure, but just some of the words that were coming through. But there are definitely children there, so maybe she's following the children to keep them quiet, or she's wanting to look after them. Martin again saying, whereas with the frequencies we all run slightly different ones, perhaps we can also pick up on the frequency that is best to communicate.
This could be exactly as I was saying, with dogs hearing different frequencies. You might find that what we perceive to be a psychic medium can actually perhaps hear or sense frequencies that most of us can't. And so that's why they appear to have these abilities. It's just another possible explanation for a whole host of questions that still remain unknown to us from a scientific point of view. But the whole beauty of all this is there's so many ifs and buts and possibilities that it becomes intriguing, doesn't it? The fact that
this place, I'm a paranormal investigator.
If I'm investigating something on a long-term basis, as you say you are there, the most important things to get are dates, names, other information that can be checked. For instance, did you have any children? How many children did you have? Were they boys? Were they girls? And it's difficult sometimes with dowsing, because you can only ask questions that solicit a yes or a no answer. But you can, over a period of time, actually get quite precise. The hardest thing to get through dowsing, in my opinion, is a surname. Very often you would need a psychic medium there that would pick up a surname, and then you can just ask and say, was your name Thompson, whatever.
Perry, hi Perry, thanks for coming in and welcome though. It's our first, she's new to our lives. I don't like the term hunters, it's investigating. My favourite part as the research and putting together the puzzle. Which I agree with that. It's like a big puzzle, and it's putting wee bits and pieces together and maybe building a picture or whatever, the case may be, as they say in the films. Mark and myself did a cold case of a murder. But this place we've had so many names, we've had so many words. Quick example, there's a staircase, and there was 4 years went up the staircase Friday night, and the rest of the girl was asked, how many people are upstairs, and it came back quite clear, 4. I could sit here all night and tell you all the answers and
one of the important things when you're on a paranormal investigation, if you've got a team, one thing that is quite important is to have it clear that the individuals within that team have got individual tasks. And one thing that's very often not done is what I call a scribe, somebody taking notes, so that when you pick up this information, it's written down. Because it's amazing when you go on an investigation and you reinvestigate and reinvestigate, how much information you can get. And obviously you're looking for clarity. I mean, one of the things that I do, which people who don't know me and are on investigations with me find quite odd, is I will appear to be communicating with something either through dowsing or glasswork or whatever, and we'll ascertain that we've got a male, they're 30 to 35 years old, and I'll suddenly throw in what I call a wobbly one, where I'll say, are you, so it's right, you're a female, 30, and I know it's a male, I'll ascertain, and you just throw in a wobbly question and people look at you, why are you answering that, but it's just to verify that you have got something there. And if they're saying to you you're on the right track and you're getting yes, throwing a question that should get a no, it just gives it more credibility. So that's something that I do. But I have, probably in the last 10 years now, I've got quite bold and said, would you be able to show yourself, or are you able to show yourself? Some of them say they are, but they don't want to. So and then if they can't, or they don't want to show themselves, I ask them if they'll stay with us on the investigation and introduce us to, or make other spirits aware that we mean them no harm. We're just interested in their story.
To communicate and get.
You basically do anything you can that comes into your head that you think might work, and some of it can be bizarre. As I said, sometimes just calling out solicits nothing at all. You then get a female in the group to call out, and you start getting responses. So whether that individual doesn't like me or would prefer to speak to a woman, I don't know. Maybe a woman herself, and she feels more comfortable. In life she's been wary of men. You just don't know.
You don't. That's part of the appeal of paranormal. You don't know. Yes. That many questions, And the other question I was going to ask you, my name comes through quite a few times. The second time we investigated there, it came through twice in a Scottish accent. Now it's quite good. Right. First, I thought, was that my name? So we listened to it over and over, and it seems to come through in every investigation. And one of the girls in the team mailed me just before we went live. She was saying, I wonder if your name keeps coming through because everybody says your name in the group.
To answer that question, I don't know. Plus, as well, I think you have to analyse what device you're using. There are a lot of these paranormal apps that are out there now that you can get on your iPhone from the App Store, etc., that have been proven to have recording devices built into them as well, which will pick up data around them, and therefore make you, if your name is mentioned consistently. So you have to explore every possibility. That is the equipment that we're getting this with. Is it authenticated? Has it got? You will find with most ghost hunting apparatus, unlike if you go out and buy yourself a vacuum cleaner, or you go out and buy yourself a food mixer in the kitchen, within the guidelines and the instructions, it will tell you, it has to by law tell you what that apparatus is capable of and what it will do for you. You will generally find with ghost hunting apparatus, you will not get that. You'll get words like may, possibly, and things like that. You won't get that it's definitely, because it's illegal for them to do so. So, you get you take this to somewhere like the SPR or the Ghost Club or somewhere like that, and you present information like that to them. They'll want to know how you know that your equipment that you're using is authenticated and can be trusted.
Well, that's it. You do need to. We use the Necrophonic app.
Yeah,
that's the one we use most.
Yeah.
We've tried other ones, but we weren't great fans of them, so we tend to stick now to the Necrophonic app. That's what we would get. It was quite clear it came through. I thought it was an Irish accent, but it turns out it's an American accent. As to, we keep getting named Rebecca, and asked one to who is Rebecca, and it came through my daughter.
Yes,
quite clear through the app.
Well, this is my whole point, really, that whether you're doing traditional forms of communication, i.e. through a psychic medium, through a glass, through a crystal pendulum, or you're using a modern ghost hunting piece of electronic apparatus, you want information really that can be verified. So you want dates, you want names, you want things like how many children did you have, were they male, were they female, because they are things that can be checked and authenticated, even through these ancestry websites, through census records. If it's fairly modern, 200 to 300 years ago, the chances are most of these ancestry websites will go back, 400 or 500 years quite comfortably, and can be checked and be reasonably accurate. So ultimately, I can see what Martin's put up there. For entertainment purposes only really gets me sometimes, but I can see the point. It's just the aid to help what your senses feel. It is what it is. It says it's for entertainment purposes. If you go out there and you're doing your paranormal investigation, your ghost hunt, or whatever you want to call it, and you're being entertained and you're enjoying yourself, then really that to me is the main purpose of the function. I'm not a scientist, so I don't have a goal to go out there and prove to the world that there is life after death or whatever like that. I go out there for my own interest, and obviously, like a detective, I want to gather as much information as I can and then authenticate it. And the more you can authenticate it, the more credible it becomes, and the more intriguing investigating the paranormal becomes.
It does. Penny's very good. I want to know the sound bank of Necrophonia. The voice on there is a strong Somerset accent where I'm from, which could not have been pre-recorded. I might have this wrong. As I say to many lies, Penny, I'm not a tech expert. As far as Sarah's in the chat, she'll probably put me right. As far as I'm aware, the Necrophonic is the only app that doesn't have a pre-recorded sound bank, or whatever you call it, in it. That's as far as I'm aware. I might be wrong on that. I use the Necrophonic, you can get the same sounds, you can pick out new ones. If you're looking for any relevant information, you can tie in with the documented history.
I think that's the bottom line, really. How you obtain that information, and whether you trust the apparatus you're using or you trust the psychic medium that's giving you the information, the credibility is all about actually finding evidence that what you're being told checks out and is correct. If it doesn't, then you've got to assume that if you were talking with a spirit, they were having fun and playing tricks and lying to you, or that the source of your information, whether it be an electronic device or a psychic medium was not correct.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's willingly or unwillingly, you don't know. But ultimately, if you can't authenticate it, then anything that you can authenticate becomes much more credible. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that's what you want. Ultimately, you want Mr. Ghost to jump out in front of you when you tell him, "Can you appear to me and show yourself?" And 5 or 6 people will all simply be there to witness it yourself. And preferably, you're going to be able to record it on a camera too. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you did that, as I said, and sent it off to the SPR, because they don't know you from Adam, their first thoughts would be, well, is this computer generated images? And people are just, because getting that sort of evidence is so rare, um, they find it difficult to accept that somebody has actually got it. Um,
Aye, that's
I
exactly.
think I think with the paranormal, that once you've experienced it yourself and you've got a level head and you can actually analyze what you've got and look at the possibilities of what it could be, explain that logically, and if you can't explain it, you speak to others who are perhaps more experienced and they say to you, well, did you think it could be this? And they put other ideas into your head of what it could be, and it still can't be explained. Then it's one of those things, the paranormal, that until you actually had a paranormal experience yourself and analysed it in that depth, uh, you don't really sure that the paranormal exists. You
That,
know,
no,
I've had husband.
that's very, very true. Mark, I've said this many a time, man. It's like fishing. You know, you can go and catch 10 big fish one time, go the next time, get nothing. One of our team's daughters came out with us on Friday night, and before she got in the car, I did say to her, look, we've had stuff at this place before. We're going tonight. You might not get anything. We might get nothing. Could be a dead night. She's a, pardon the pun. If it turned out that it wasn't, it was quite a lively night. Um, when I get, as I do, when I get asked, do I believe in my answer, and I've seen nothing so I can explain to me that's paranormal. Gail, who just joined our team a couple of weeks, about a month ago, something, she'd she'd never been on an investigation, and she'd watched the ghost programs, the usual. And she came out in the investigation with us, and she says it's totally different. Just what you were saying about, you have to experience it for yourself. It's okay sitting at home watching, say, Ghost Adventures, and they say, right, we've got a spirit here and a spirit there. But as you say, well, you need to be, and that's what exactly what Gail said, you need to actually go and sit and take part, and, you know, you feel it in your senses what's going on around about you, and you know what you hear and what you don't hear. And she was quite well, quite a few of the girls, we ended up ending the investigation that night because 2 or 3 of the team were kind of freaked out by the breathing and what have you. So I thought, no, we'll call it a day. But see, she was quite taken aback by it. And I'm not a big fan of the apps. We've decided we're going to try going old school for a while. We tried a compass. We didn't get a compass. Tried that. It didn't work on the first investigation, but we're going to keep trying it. You know.
Yeah, I tend to like to douse. Um, I like to douse with the crystal, and I like to work with the glass. Basically, because you can see something happening, and if you're with people you know and you trust, you know that they're not going to move that glass, and they're not going to cheat or do anything like that, because you know them and you trust them, and you also know. One of the things that always gets me about the TV shows is every time you watch a TV show, something pretty dramatic happens. It's normally more dramatic than even the most experienced paranormal investigator experience. And I know from doing it for a long period of time that probably 50% of the time, absolutely nothing happens, which I can actually categorically say, yeah, that's definitely paranormal. And I've said these sort of figures before, and these are just figures I've plucked off my head. I haven't documented them or plotted them. But I would say 45% what you do feel is possibly paranormal if you actually analyse it really in depth, there is normally a possible explanation. No matter how implausible, there is a possible explanation.
Mhm.
I remember vividly, I may have told you this story once, of being in a darkened room and a number of people feeling that they'd got a spirit there, and someone said that somebody was touching their face, and they could feel this person touching them face, and they were touching them on demand. We happened to have a locked off night vision camera there, and it clearly picked up a little money spider that had come out of their hair and was crawling down their face. So there
Mhm.
was a logical explanation. But had that camera not been there, that person was convinced that something was touching them. Indeed, they were correct, something was. But that night vision camera was able to show us a logical explanation as to what it was. So, sometimes, even though there doesn't appear to be a logical explanation, there can be.
Mhm.
Um, I've been in I remember once a, a trigger object being moved quite a lot, about an inch. And again, the locked off camera picked up a little shrew that had walked across it and moved it. Again, without that locked off camera, it would appear that in a locked off room where no human being could enter, that item had moved an inch, but it hadn't. There was a small rodent had moved it. So it's very easy with the paranormal, because it's so wow. How could that happen? Um,
Mhm.
the likelihood of that happening must be, percentage wise, must be enormous. Of an actual being inside a large room and you having a relatively small trigger item, and I think that the thing it could smell something on there. It might have, probably maybe one of us was eating a cheese sandwich before and put the trigger object, and there was the rodent could pick up the smell of the cheese or something. I don't know, but they walked straight towards it, sniffed it, walked across it, and as their back end moved across it, it flipped it around and effectively moved it probably about an inch. And so, without the benefit of that night vision camera, we would have been adamant that something.
Something else. Something else.
Yep.
Would move. See that's the thing. Just I've got a few comments to put up, Mark. But before I come, it's the you see that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about being on command. As I say, I'm not a big fan of gadgets. I never have been. To me, they're kind of 50-50. And I know a lot of people say, it could be coincidence, blah, blah, blah. But to me, if you've got, I'm not just talking about our investigation, I'm talking about, investigations in general. If you've got, for instance, a K2 meter that's going off in command all the time, and when you're not asking any questions, it just sits there dormant,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and then you ask another question and bang, up it goes. To
Yep.
me, that's no coincidence. To me, that would be kind of proof that you do have something there. But
I,
I bet
I
a
would.
lot of people that doubt that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree with you on that. But you also have to take in this telekinetic factor. Is it
Mhm.
the spirit of somebody that's expired that's lighting that light for you, or is it you and the people with you doing that telekinetically because you want it to light up? You're looking at it and saying, please give us a sign, and you're not even aware that you've got that ability. It's something that I'm not trying to come up with an explanation for something that appears to be real, but it is a possible explanation. So you have to sort of have that at the back of your mind too. Uh,
Oh, I do, yeah. Just before I come to college, just when you were saying that, is the other night, once we'd finished the investigations, the cars were parked. Now, it's a country road basically that runs in the estate. And I was standing with the torch, and I thought I'd seen something done maybe 300-400 yards along the road, and it was pitch black. But I walked down and before I realised that I had the K2 meter in my hand.
yeah,
And when I got down the bottom of the road, it started going off. It started going up to yellow, then red. And so I
yeah,
put the torch next to it. I didn't have my phone on me. My phone was in the car. I put the torch next to it. Never done anything. So just for, not just for fun, but just out of curiosity, I says, well, if you're here do it again, make it light up, and it lit
Yes.
up, it went to yellow.
Yeah.
And I done it 3 or 4 times, but I ended up joking with it. I said, look, you wait till we finish filming, and then you start, And I said, so come on, do it. And I was holding it up in the air, and I said, go do it again for me. I dare you do it again. And I joke it, I wasn't walking the spirit, and it went up again. And it's just, I can't explain it, but that's Gail saying she's getting better and braver every time. Gail's one of her team. She is getting better. Give a girl her due. Martin's got a question.
I think you'll find with the paranormal, the longer you do it, and we fear it because we don't understand it. But when you've been doing it for a long time, such a long time as I have, you don't fear it anymore, and you want something to happen. And because you've been doing it for so long and you've never been hurt, you don't fear it anymore, if that sounds makes sense. So when you take away that fear as well, if we're naturally got a fear of dealing with something that we don't understand, we're naturally a little bit on edge. I mean, like, if you're in a place and there's a great big dog in the park and it's boisterous and it looks, as if it could attack you, you're naturally sort of on edge a little bit. Once you've got to know that dog and you know that it doesn't mean you any harm, it's just its character, it won't hurt you at all, you suddenly view that dog slightly differently and your senses are naturally more relaxed. So I think with paranormal investigating, the longer that you go and do it, and the longer that you go without having any what I would call frightening or negative experiences, I don't think I've had any really what I would call negative experiences. I've had experiences where I felt that I'm communicating with something that doesn't particularly like me or want me there. But I've never really sort of gone down the road of, it's demonic or it means me harm and it wishes to hurt me. Normally, if I'm starting to get to that phase, I back off and leave because you're dealing with something that you don't know. So if you do feel, our natural reaction is fight or flight. So we either turn around and face it head on, or we run away. And I think that's the same with the spirit world, really.
As you're saying about the fear, but people. I spoke to Charlie for the Haunted Hunts with us, and spoke to the Port of the Paranormal one last night. And we're saying the same thing. I think with me, it's not a fear. You get a long tunnel. There's a long tunnel in the basement of this mansion, and it's pitch black at night. You can't see a thing.
Yep.
Still walk down it, and you're not scared. You get just probably you get too excited. You do. It's what a buzz you get, because it's a vaulted basement. So there's about 6 or 7 vaults, and you think, is something going to jump out here? Or is there something standing at the end of this tunnel waiting on me? But you keep going because it's a buzz and it's a wanting to know, But you think, I shouldn't really be doing this in the dark myself, but to pop with it, I want to go and find out, and you just keep going. I mean, Martin's asking about the Ouija board. Mark, do you think it's a good option?
Well, I don't use a Ouija board as such, and this is, I think I've mentioned this before. I've actually got a pack of cards, and I tend to put a glass out first, just on a table, and we put our fingers on the glass. It's best to put the side of your finger on the glass as opposed to the sort of fingerprint part on the glass. Because if you've got the side of your finger on your glass, your elbow is then locked. So if you have got anybody in your group that's faking it and moving backwards and forwards, you can see that elbow move quite clearly. It's a lot easier to spot than if someone has got their finger on and moving their hand backwards and forwards. Because if it's sideways on the side, that side of your finger, as I'm showing there, that's how I was taught. And I basically asked them to move the glass anywhere. And if the glass is starting to move, and do give it some time. I think, depending on how patient you are, go for at least 10 minutes of calling out and holding your finger there. Sometimes it does take that long for it to build. There are a lot of people who say that, the glass moving is all to do with this ideomotor effect, small
Mhm.
electrical impulses that are so undetectable that we don't know that we're doing them. I don't agree with that, because sometimes the glass doesn't move at all. Now, if these electrical impulses are there all the time, then it stands to reason to me that the glass would move every time. Um,
Mhm.
and it doesn't. So sometimes the glass will move very, very slowly, and as if it's a real struggle. Other times it will fly around the table. So yeah, I move the glass just to work with the glass first of all, and then if I'm satisfied that we've got something, I'll put a yes and a no card on the table, and then I'll start asking questions that solicit a yes or no. If it's really going well and it becomes intriguing, then I will put the A, B, C, D, in a circle around it. Um, I was taught not to use a Ouija board because um, the worst thing that you can do on a paranormal investigation, if you connect with something and it's not very pleasant, is invite it in. And I was told that, working with a Ouija board, you actually entice a spirit, if you believe in these things, into that circle with you. So if you get something that's not very pleasant and you get up and say, right, I'm not dealing with this anymore, I don't like it, and you shut the board and walk away, you've still got that circle within the board. All you've done is just folded it in half. So by working with the cards, as I do, you can just jumble those cards up as if you're shuffling a pack of cards, and you break any connection. But the thing that I remember my Uncle Trevor telling me this, and it's quite important. If you get to a point where you feel that you've got something and it's not welcome and it's not pleasant, tell it that it's not welcome. Get up and get out, because you don't know what you're dealing with. And you see these TV programs, and you get the one sort of paranormal expert, and he's going to stand up to this demon and stuff. It makes good TV, but
Mhm.
ultimately,
Aye.
uh, it's not really wise to take on something that you don't know what you're dealing with. That's my personal opinion. Others may disagree. Now, I've always done that. I've had a few occasions. I could probably count on two hands how many times it's happened, but we've felt that whatever we're dealing with, it's hostile. It doesn't want us there. I don't think I've ever felt that it could possibly hurt me, but at the back of my mind, there always is that possibility.
You've got
So,
that wee doubt, that wee niggle, kind of
yeah.
at
So
the.
obviously, I know it sounds a bit sort of what everybody does these days, politically correct, but health and safety comes first. So if you've got a team of people and you're dealing with something and it's not very pleasant, it's best to say, right, whatever you are, you're not welcome. We are leaving. Pick up your stuff, jumble me Ouija cards up, and I leave.
Mhm.
I very often go back though. I have to. I'm sort of intrigued, but I
That's the
don't.
same.
Yeah, I don't tend to do what they do on the TV, where the lone person goes back and does a lone vigil and stuff like that. And I suppose it's different with a TV show because you've got a camera there recording everything. But in a normal paranormal investigation situation, if you go back and there is some activity, having someone with you, uh, you've got a form of support, but more importantly, you've got another witness. So if something does happen that's paranormal, I can go back and say, oh, this happened, that happened, and there's only my word for that. But if there's
Mhm.
two or more people there, it gives it more credibility. When we had that instance in the Peterborough Museum with this ball that did a circle, there was four of us, and we sort of all witnessed it. So then that it's not one individual who's made a mistake or whatever. It's a bit like you can get up quickly and see stars in front of your eyes. We all know that those stars aren't there really. It's just the fact that you've got up quickly. So three other
Mhm.
people down in the room would not see those stars. So it's all about perception and credibility.
Yeah, I know what you mean about your tutor, or you want to get back. We've twice, some of the teams felt uneasy in two separate locations, and we're big believers if the team doesn't feel comfortable enough to carry on, then you just, you shut it down and you leave. End of
Yeah,
story. But
yeah,
both times I've done it, it's always at the back of my mind, I want to get back.
yeah.
I want to see what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, as you just says there, like see this place. I like to get back and see what's happening where they didn't feel easy. Justin's saying, but as when you turn the camera off or before you turn, I happened the other night, Justin. Before we turned the camera on, the cat ball was going nuts, and then it stopped after we put the camera on. Justin was asking what team you're from, Mark, but I'll let you explain to Justin who you are.
Well, what I do is I run a small team. We call ourselves Rising Phoenix. We've been running for about 10 years, and we're basically just a group of friends. We don't tend to sort of advertise for recruits or anything like that. We charge a £15 a year fee, which covers the cost of our insurance, our public liability insurance, and we go out probably once every couple of months, normally, COVID permitting, and or occasionally somebody will contact me and say they've got a problem in their house and would I go and have a look at it, and I normally take along one or two members of the team, and we sort of have a look into it. Normally, if we do get a call like that, it's somebody that has not lived there very long. They've moved in recently, or the other thing that they've done is they've made strategic alterations to the property. I don't mean painted and decorated it. I mean knocked down walls or changed the structure. It seems that paranormal activity can lay dormant in a haunted location for years, decades, possibly centuries. But once you get sort of new people in there, it's almost as if they're curious and they want to come out and, you know, this is our house. What are you doing here? You're new. We don't know you. And the same if you start knocking it around and changing the structure, that seems to stir it up. That's something that I have noticed over, you know, the long time that I've been doing it.
That's really weird. I'm going to put up Martin's comment and then I'll come back to what you just said, Mark, because that's really weird that you. Well, Martin says first he feels it's an honour if they wish to contact you and interact with you. I don't feel scared at all. I know what you mean, Martin. But Martin's, I'll click this. There we go. I had 1 to 2 bad experiences in the past 30 years. Doing it once, I had a contact with a nasty energy. I pushed it and wrote to the point where he wouldn't let me speak without me being physically sick. I was actually taken out by other team members. So, I mean, a lot of people don't believe that it can affect you physically, you know, but there's so many, like what Martin says, and we use it as well, Mark. There's so many reports about being affected, whether it's feeling sick, you know, faint, being scratched or pushed, or, you know, there's numerous things. To say
in my book, there's an interesting example of that. And we were able to debunk it in this particular occasion. But we were in a place in Huntingdon called the Commemoration Hall, and it's basically a big hall that's used in the centre of Huntingdon, that's used by the community for various things. It has an underground level, a huge basement which covers approximately 70% of underneath the actual ground level, and it's got toilets in there and a cloakroom. And I had a member of our team, a lady called Kim Smith, who, when she went into the gents' toilets, she felt so poorly. She was physically sick in the loos. Luckily, we were in the toilet, so she was able to go across to the pan and be sick. We took her out of that room, and she recovered. And for about an hour and a half, she was absolutely fine. Took her back into the room, and within minutes she was physically sick again. Now, we did a full sort of scan of that room, and we noticed that the EMF levels in there were particularly high, and this was natural EMF. This was caused by electrical gadgets, and she was obviously sensitive to those electrical impulses. Although we were underground, our sort of heads were at the level of the pavement of the high street outside. So if you can imagine the high street of a town centre, the curbs and that got electrical cables running to them in all the shops. And this, particularly in the gents' toilets, the EMF readings that we would get were off the scale. and I think that in that particular instance it wasn't paranormal. Um, but I have actually seen instances where they were. Again, in Hinchinbrook House, there's a room in there called the reception room, and when I did an investigation in there, one of our team, a lady called Mel Arnold, uh, she sat in this particular chair, and she felt overcome with emotion and sadness, and she sort of almost started sobbing, and then cried out, "He lied, he lied, he lied," and she didn't know why. I've known Mel for a long time, decade, I suppose we've been, and I've never seen her act like that before. She does have some psychic capabilities, but and that reaction within that particular room is not unusual. It seems to stir up the sort of emotions in people, especially those that are psychically sensitive. I felt absolutely nothing in there. Uh, but on that particular investigation, which took place in 2015, we split into three teams because it's such a huge house, and we were sort of moving around. When I spent my time in that room, there's absolutely nothing at all that I deemed to be paranormal. Yet the other two teams, um, they reported that was probably the area where they got most activity, and a lot of it was emotional feelings and sadness that overcame people that are very experienced paranormal investigators. They're not going to be swayed by fear because they've been in scarier places before. This was a very comfortable sitting room, really, and that was just how it affected them. So it wouldn't surprise me anything that I heard, that it was capable of affecting people. You talk about poltergeist activity, about people getting scratched, bitten, shoved, pushed. But there are probably more cases where people's emotions are affected, I think. People sometimes get a blinding headache.
That I think that's quite well. I've heard quite a few people get blinding headaches. Just for a come Penny's comment, which I like come back to what you said about the dormant, but we talk about it be affecting you. This building's got 3 floors. The staircase, we were on the second floor. Well, we're not at the top, but when you go to the second floor, you get this kind of sicky feeling. It's no nice. As soon as you go on the third floor, the feeling goes. And it's the same coming down. As soon as you hit the second floor, the feeling hits you, and then you get back down to the first floor, and there's nothing. I found that really, really weird. But when you say there, Mark, about the spirits can lie dormant, as with Penny saying as well. We were actually talking about this, I think it was last night in the team, because we've looked back obviously we've looked back in the history of the state, but we've looked at in the paranormal history, and we can't find anything except a story about a supposed ghost fox, right? This is going back years. We don't know if this is true or not. And as I said earlier on, there is supposedly one picture of a little boy at a window. But apart from that, there is nothing. There's no ghost stories, nothing. But I mean, you can check your YouTube channel, check your Facebook. Our investigations are up there so far. We're still trying to upload others. People will see the activity we've had in this location, but there's been nothing beforehand that we can find.
Yeah, I think you've got the possibility. The thing that springs to my mind immediately with things being dormant is how do we explain anniversary hauntings when something happens but only on the one day of the year? So in theory, the other 364 days of the year, it's dormant somewhere, whether it's in the building or it goes away elsewhere, but then it returns on this particular day, which has some historical significance and stuff like that. So I do believe you get a I don't know, let's say the stereotypical sort of haunted ghost carrying his head under the arm. You get it in a particular place, and then it's not seen for 20, 30 years, and then someone comes along and sees exactly the same as someone has experienced. So then you start sort of thinking along the lines of, well, is this an emotional recording that's been recorded, and
Mm-hmm.
when all the conditions are correct, um, then anybody who happens to be here on this time at this date will see it. And we're into stone tape territory here of emotions, our spirit, something that physically can't be seen. What happens to it when we expire? Does it just wither and evaporate and die like the rest of our physical bodies, or can it be stored in the fabric of a building or a place and then
Mm-hmm.
replayed? Or are there people that have the capabilities to see it and have it replayed where others don't? I'm talking, I guess, people with psychic capabilities. So it's a fascinating subject, and there is an awful lot of evidence to say that yeah, something like that is going on. But uh, I suppose there is an element of us that would like to prove it. But I'm just quite content to witness it sometimes. I mean, I've been doing this now for over 40 odd years, and what keeps driving me on is the thought of seeing another apparition. Or I saw one when I was 15. I'm 60 now. I've never seen another one. I've been on investigations where other people I know and trust have, and I've got
Mm-hmm.
no reason to doubt them. But there's a part of me that says, "Oh, why can't I see another one? I want to see another one." Other people are saying they see spirit all the time around them.
Well,
Uh,
that's it. It's true again. It's with fishing. One person catches one, another might catch a
yep.
net. So you think it's possible that spirits are lying dormant? They might be, as Penny says, they might be stirred up by people investigating or calling out in other places.
Well, I think basically, when we don't do a paranormal investigation, we're trying to interact. We must have some belief that there might be the possibility that there's spirits there. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this. Um, and generally, if we did it 10 times and nothing ever happened, we'd give up and say, well, what's the point of doing this? But
Mm-hmm.
realistically, once we've had something happen, and sometimes we go along to an investigation and nothing happens at all, and we still enjoy it because we're generally in a place of historical significance. You've got good people around you, and you have a laugh and a joke, and I don't mean a laugh and a joke, mucking about and pretending we're ghosts or whatever, but um, I think most of us ultimately do it because it's enjoyable.
That's
Uh,
it.
and it's fascinating, when you do get something, and it sort of it draws us back, and we want to go and experience something like that again.
I mean, you can, as you see, we've done it as well. We've been in Greyfriars many times and we have had nothing. And we've sat there, and the most exciting thing we've had is maybe our batteries draining.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
it. And you say, right, let's go home. You've been there. And I mean, you talk about Greyfriars or something, but Justin asked a question. It's actually quite a good question. I've never actually thought of it. Do spirits understand leap years?
I don't know. I've got no idea. And I mean, if you look at things like anniversary hauntings, over the centuries, the calendars have changed. So, if you've got a date, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, and it was the 17th of April, uh, then the calendars have changed and evolved. So the 17th of April 1,000 years ago is not going to be the same as the 17th of April 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of questions like that, which sort of point to doubts of, could a spirit possibly know the date? Is it intelligent enough to know the date, or is it just a piece of energy that seems to know when a period of time has evolved and it's time for it to raise its head again? Um, to answer that question honestly, I don't think anybody could. And the same as if you actually put it someone, does ghosts definitely exist? Uh, you will get an opinion based on their experiences. Another person, based on their experiences, will tell you it's absolutely rubbish. It can't possibly happen. When you're dead, you're dead. You don't live on and stuff. Yeah, that's Pippa, Penny. He comes into this bedroom. We've got a cat on the bed. She tends to. We've got two. We've got a male. They're brother and sister. They're about 8 years old. She's quite vocal. If you don't give her attention, she tells you.
It's like it's our male cat. He can be quite. He'll sit at the door and even after he's been fed, meow and meow, and you think, seriously, you've just been fed.
Yeah.
Martin's saying about different languages.
Exactly the same thing. You know, you go to a paranormal lockdown when they came to Hingingbrook House, and they were going around with these devices and communicating with spirits. It was all in a broad American accent in an English country house that's been an English country house for 1,000 years. So are we saying, you know, the device is picking up the voice and just translates it into some form of electronic human voice that we can hear, and it just happens to be programmed in an American accent? Or, you know, why should that be? A lot of people say, well, you know, the chances of anybody speaking in an American accent picking up spirits in this house that's 1,000 years old in the middle of rural England is highly unlikely. So there's a lot of questions with the paranormal that when asked, you know, you can't understand. Languages is what intrigued me with some of these paranormal TV shows. Have actually gone to foreign countries where they're communicating, you know, in Germany or somewhere where English is probably not well spoken. And so there's always that little bit of doubt as to, well, would this really be happening? Would they be able to understand them talking to them in a language that they've probably never heard?
I've been asked that before. You know, does, you know, a ghost of a Frenchman speak French? Does a ghost of an Italian speak Italian?
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
No.
It's one of these questions you can't answer. So, well, if they're French, how would they understand what you're saying? And again, so I don't know.
I know I'm beginning to sound a bit like a sort of record being replayed over, but all you can really do is ascertain as much information as you can, whether you're using an electronic gizmos or whether you're using traditional old school Ouija boards, dowsing, or however you want to call it, is to get as much credible information as you can, which can be authenticated. So again, it's names, dates, professions, and things like that, which are likely to be on record somewhere. That adds a lot of credibility, I think, to the information you've got if it can be authenticated. Sometimes I've had stuff that's incredible how well it can be authentic. Other times it just doesn't make any sense and nothing ties up. So you're then left wondering, well, you know, is this information that we've got really from somebody that has expired, that their spirit lives on in the past, or is this some information that's locked away in my brain and telekinetically I'm moving the glass or the pendulum and making these names up? So authentication, you know, is always good. And I don't mean to prove to others, to prove to yourself, you know.
That's exactly. I mean, that's the first recording we done. The first, I sent the first investigation. Sorry, we done. I sent it to 11 different people. I told them nothing about it. I just told them this is an investigation we did last night. The player, and the amount that came back that said the same thing about that investigation. And that's not a case of we're not wanting to turn and say, oh, you know, look at us, whoopee, we've proved that ghosts exist. We want to do this right because, one, for ourselves, but two, out of respect for the people who, you know, lived on that estate and we passed away on that estate. And, you know what I mean? You do it out of respect as well. But for our own, as you say, Mark, for our own curiosity, and plus it's such an intriguing story because there's that many legs to it that we want to find out. You do get, as you said earlier on, you do get hooked.
Yeah.
And
if you actually get somewhere and you're really picking up a lot of information and you're collecting as much information as possible, the things that can be checked, if they actually do check out and can be authenticated, then the other things that you've picked up that perhaps can't ever be authenticated, they become more intriguing because you've generally got a story building. And like most of us, we're naturally curious. So, you know, if we're getting told a story that happened 200-300 years ago, and we've got the dates, we've got the names, we've got how many children they had, and that can be checked out, then it's probably more likely that the rest of the stuff that we're being told with is going to be accurate as well. And sometimes just the story itself can be fascinating.
Mark's got a question. You think bad weather storm make a difference to seeing the moon? Personally, I believe that it does.
Well, traditionally, if you watch your average Hammer horror movie, all the nasty stuff goes on with thunder and lightning and rain. In reality, a lot of paranormal activity that goes on can happen in sort of any time, as we're talking, daytime, nighttime, good weather, bad weather. There is a possibility. I mean, one of the things that often gets mentioned with ghosts is the fact that it appears to be some sort of electrical energy present. So if you've got thunder and lightning going on, and also running water is supposed to conduct electricity. Well, we know it does. So, I mean, when Paranormal Lockdown came into Hinchinbrook House in 2018, Nick Broff made a big thing about the cellar, because in the cellar at Hinchinbrook there is a natural spring. So you can go down in the cellar and you can see this water bubbling up. And he felt that the moving water was probably a factor as to why so much paranormal activity had been recorded over the years. I don't really know whether I believe that or not. What I do know is that there is some evidence to suggest that electricity is a factor in the genesis of spirits, them appearing or whatever, and that we know that water conducts electricity very well. So there is a link, but whether it's been proven or how it's been proven, it's a bit like poltergeist activity. With poltergeists, there are a number of explanations that have gone on for poltergeist activity that are perfectly natural. For instance, and that involves water. You can have large bodies of water flowing under a building that in certain conditions, let's say after a storm when there's a hell of a lot of that water, it's moving at pace with a lot of velocity, and it can make a building above tremble and a picture fall off a wall or something like that, which maybe some people say, oh, it's a poltergeist, when in fact there is a logical explanation. It's water moving underground. Obviously earthquakes and things like that are we know that they would probably cause that to happen. So you have to sort of have a fairly open mind and be fairly skeptical as to what could possibly be the cause of it. And in a lot of cases, I would say probably 90% of the time, something that you perceive as paranormal, if you dig deep enough, there is a logical explanation, or even a possible logical explanation. And if there's just a possible one, then what you've got there is inconclusive. So you've either got to find more evidence, which will give it more credibility, or you've got to debunk it, really.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, just to say about moving stuff, we're sitting in a pub, and it was you could smoke. It was back when you could smoke in pubs, and you remember the metal ashtrays you used to get. I think every pub had one, and we were sitting. It was a round table. So it was just the two of us sitting there, but the pub was quite busy, and this ashtray started moving across the table, and so I was looking at it, and then I noticed my mate was looking at it, and it wasn't flying; it was crawling across the table.
Yeah.
And then people at the next table were watching this ashtray just slide. Turned out the barmaid had just cleaned the table, and there's a
Yeah.
very, very thin film of water. It was actually,
Yeah.
it was the lassie came back out and she wiped the table again.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very thin film of water, moisture, whatever you call it. And the ashtray was moving on this. But see, for about 5 minutes, we were transfixed on this, thinking,
Yeah.
you know, it was a ghost or something. And then we discovered the table was wet.
It is like a challenge that when you get something, then you think that it's might be paranormal. You've got to literally go through everything that you possibly can to explain it.
Penny since usually
Penny says, I've seen that with a glass. You can actually give it a slight push and it will speed it up and make it happen faster.
I'll keep going. But that was weird that night. We were sitting watching this ashtray move, and then, you know, we weren't freaked out, we were just kind of, and we sort of noticed the next table. There must have been about 4 or 5 people sitting at this table, and everybody was focused on this ashtray. You know, just one of these wee stories that pop into your head when somebody mentions something similar. But just as I have a theory that castles, stately homes, and churches were for conducting energy that was transferred through water.
Yeah, what's interesting there is when the people who built these objects, the castles or the houses or whatever, what they used as a means of saying, right, this is the place where we build it. If that's correct, then you can get people talking about other paranormal things like UFOs and other life forms coming from different planets thousands of years ago or whatever, and when some of these buildings and things were built. So it just, the more you think about it sometimes, the more it can blow your mind, because you can sort of start thinking about spirits and ghosts of earthly human beings, and you can start thinking about things that exist, and we know they've existed for hundreds of thousands of years, yet the explanation to how they existed and the people found this information out when they didn't have the knowledge that we have. You start then thinking about, well, you know, is there another life form from somewhere else that's vastly superior to us that came and
well, that's, I mean, you know, it can pickle your mind if you know, you can sit and think, one, I mean, look at what Stuart Crosby just says, pyramids use the pyramids. Look at the pyramids, the Egyptians building the pyramids.
Yeah.
And these things were marvels engineering. You couldn't, you know, stick a bank card basically. Not that bank cards then, but you know what I mean. You couldn't get anything between the stones. And these were built by people 2,000-3,000 years ago that had nothing but ropes, bits of wood, you know, chisels, stuff like that. But you think, how did they know? I mean, I remember watching a documentary a few years ago now about Stonehenge, and it was these engineers. They were trying to recreate one of the, you know, the pyramids, one of the arches. And they said, we're going to try, and these guys were top of their field. Yeah. And they said, we're going to try doing this using materials that we think they would have used, but, you know, again, wood, rope. And they gave up. Yeah. They couldn't do it. Yeah. And these guys had been to university and everything. It says, we don't know how you did it. But I mean, Stonehenge is, I don't know how old Stonehenge, thousands of years. Yeah. And so then
I went there a few months back actually, and you know, every time I go back there, because it's changed now. You sort of park and you get a bus ride up to it now. You can still walk, and you know, when you walk around it and you look at it and you see how it's all lined up, you know, with the solar system and everything else, it's just mind blowing to think how could that have been done all those years ago.
Well, I mean, as the pyramids at Giza are meant to be in a perfect alignment, you think, well, how did they manage it? And then, as you say, you think Stonehenge, the pyramids, and all the other kind of marvels of the world. You think, well, was it aliens? Did somebody come down and show these people, you know, do this? You know, you just, and you can end up, you know, breaking your brain, basically, I think. If
Yeah.
you know, because, and that's what I find so fascinating about the paranormal. There's that many avenues to it, that many explanations to it, you know. Look
Yeah.
how we build today with our advancements, and back then does make sense. Some things were too big for normal people to move. Well, look at the stones that they built the pyramids. These things were
Yeah.
massive,
Yeah.
but they managed to bring them for miles and
Yeah.
drag them to the top of a pyramid. And you
Yeah.
think, but we're getting off the paranormals. So tonight was about daytime and nighttime investigations. We always investigate now, as you say, but probably because our senses are enhanced then because of the lack of distraction. Well, but do you think Hollywood's got a lot to do with it as well, maybe in these ghost programs? Because every, ghosty stuff always seems to happen at night.
Well, I think if you go back to if you go back and you look at things like Halloween and traditional ghost stories or spooky stories, they go back in our culture to the past when we didn't have a television, and so the only form of heating we had was fire. So most of us in our winters, our ancestors would spend their night sitting round a fire for warmth and telling stories. And there's a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, if we watch we can be absolutely terrified by a horror film on TV. If we actually stand back and we analyse it, we know that this is not real. It's filmed in a studio. Yet we're so engrossed in it and we're actually scared by it, or we get a thrill out of being scared by it. And I think the same applies with the traditional ghost story that would have been told when, remember in, the clocks are going to change next month and it'll be dark by 5 o'clock in the evening. And
Oh, that's right. There will be that, but
so
that's
you,
with kids. If you've got young kids, I find that's good because you can move their clock back and lie about bedtime because it's
yeah,
dark, and
yeah,
what's it good that way. But however, carry on, Mark. Sorry.
yeah. So I think that basically because our eyes can't see in the dark, there is an atmosphere of, well, we can't see, we don't know what's there. And so I think, again, probably the amount of paranormal activity that can exist during daylight hours is probably just the same as that would exist in night time. But I think that if you sit in a room on a bright summer's day and you've got your eyes open, you're naturally distracted. If you're trying to focus on any one particular thing, your eyes are naturally distracting you. So if you sit in that same room, in a darkened room, and you are listening and calling out as you would in a paranormal investigation, it's easier to actually focus on the task that you're doing. And I think that's probably why people do it. And I suppose for those that don't do it, and just there is that element of we enjoy there's a little part of us that enjoys being scared, which is why people watch horror movies, when ultimately that we know these people are just actors and there's probably 30 people around them with cameras and everything else like that, but it appears that what we're watching is the thing and the victim in a room all alone miles from nowhere, when if we really thought about it deeply, we know in reality that's not true.
I mean, I believe it or not, I know investigators that they'll go, investigating, but they'll not watch a horror film. But
Yeah,
they'll go into graveyards and middle of the night. But
yeah,
I don't watch horror films; they're too scary. Yeah, how
yeah,
does that even make sense?
yeah, yeah. I must admit, I don't watch horror films anymore. I just, I don't know whether they can be scary. Even something like the music can make them scary. But ultimately, if I'm watching a horror film, at the back of my mind, I know that it's not real. Yet when you're on a paranormal investigation and you're in a cemetery in the middle of the night or somewhere, um, you do know that what you hear and what you see is real. It's not a film set. It may well be the local wildlife. It may well be caused by the elements around you, the wind, the rain, wildlife, or whatever. So, but you know that what you're hearing is real.
You
Um, the thing to do then is investigate and find out whether there is a natural, logical explanation for it, or it is something that can't be explained.
But that's it. You need to debunk it as much as
Yeah,
possible. As I say, we've done investigation the daytime and nighttime at Caldwell, and we've had some of my activity both times. What I'm going to do as well, we're going to walk the estate at night time, and we're going to walk it at daytime
yeah,
with the meters. And we're going to do a couple of investigations at different parts at
yeah,
night time and during the day, and just compare them, see if we get the same results. We might not, we might get nothing,
yeah.
you know.
I think one of the things that's important and often gets forgotten on a paranormal investigation is what I call the scribe, somebody that's writing down what the rest of the group pick up, because
Mhm.
something that you may regard as insignificant, by going back over and over again and picking up the same thing again, it can become significant, if that makes sense. So I always say to people when they come to me and they say, I've got a ghost in my house, I'm sure it is, I've had this happen, I've had that happen. Um, they can tell me generally in great detail exactly what has happened. And when I say to them, well, when was that then? Oh, it was last week, I think, last Tuesday, or was it Wednesday? And
Mhm.
they'll say, what time was it? Was it nine? Well, between 9 and 1/2 past. Well, you want to record those details in great detail. So I say to them, look, if you think you've got a ghost and you've got stuff happening regularly, keep a little diary, and I call it a ghost diary. Date, put in there the exact date, the exact time, a brief account of what happened, and basically where it happened, the exact room or the exact particular place. And if you continue to do that over a period of time, patterns can start to appear. And I've actually done that to the point where I have been able to successfully predict when activity might occur. I'm going into Hinchinbrook House in December to do an investigation. And the reason I chose that is because a lot of the documented evidence uh, suggests that December or around Christmas is a time when paranormal activity has been reported and logged there. So my main reason for going then is because I know in the past it's happened before. So the importance of having somebody list the details down, particularly a place that you go back and go back and go back again, can be
Mhm.
very relevant. It takes a while. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, but after a period of a year, you can start to see if you go to a place once a year, say, you go to a number of sites, and there's always one that every year we go back there as a team because it's really got an interesting haunted history and we want to go back. We didn't get anything last time, we might get something this time. 3 years
Mhm.
ago, we had a hell of a lot happen there. So if you keep a log of what you experience, it can sometimes be very, very interesting and yielding.
But I'm going to steal your idea, Mark, because see, we've been here, and that's exactly what I've been trying to do. Is a lot happened, and you're saying you think back. Well, when did we hear that? When did we hear that noise? Was it last Tuesday? Was it Wednesday?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say on a live, I'm stealing your idea, but I will, because that is a brilliant idea to write it down. Because
It's particularly,
you get a lot of stuff going on. You do
yeah.
lose track.
Yeah, you'll find that you forget things. In most cases, when people have invited me to their house and they've got this happening, they've got that happening, and I will ask them, right, what happened, and they can give me real, very detailed information of what happened. And when you say, okay, and they'll normally know roughly where it happened exactly, but when you ask them for when and what day and what time of day, it's very vague. They don't sort of take a note of those details, and they, if you record them, and then you get the same things happening. The next, you find with some places that activity seems to escalate in October, November, and it doesn't seem to be much activity reported at another time. So if you get a really haunted location that's well known, uh, I always say to the people who run it, well, every time you have a visitor, hotels and pubs are particularly relevant. If you get guests that stay overnight and they report something, then they're going to be gone the next day. So if they've reported it to you, take down the details, log it in the book. You might find on exactly the same day at exactly the same time next year, somebody else reports that same thing. So you're starting to compile data that gives the whole thing credibility. If somebody saw this a year ago on this date, and somebody completely different has seen it a year later and explained the same thing, you've got credibility. And that's what it's all about, really. It's like a court case. You build evidence, and the more evidence that you've got, the more credible it becomes. And
Exactly.
if you haven't got credible evidence, you've got to say it's not conclusive.
I mean, that's why I send the first a few recordings to people. There was 11 different people, because it's easy for me to sit here and say, right, well, that's a voice, not through the app. Somebody comes and says, no, don't believe you. Say, well, I've got 11 people who have said the same thing,
Yeah,
as I've said, and I've told them, I've not given them any information.
yeah,
It's harder to crack that one than as it's
yeah,
just one person saying it.
yeah. Well, there was another sort of thing that was being said about paranormal investigating. If you go to a place that's allegedly haunted, and there's stories about this particular place, and all the people going know that it's supposed to be haunted by a monk, there is a sort of reasoning that they'll see a monk because they know that it's there. So you shouldn't investigate or you shouldn't research a place before you go to it. I've always been against that, because I think that if you know the story, then obviously, yes, you are looking for that because you know it's a known story. But if you don't know the place, you can get something that you perceive is insignificant, and it gets missed. And it actually is very significant if you know the story. So I think now that the SPR, they brought a book out where they're now saying that you should research a place before you go in there to investigate. When a lot of places you turn up and the caretaker or janitor who's responsible for the building, he said, oh, you won't want to know about, I'll tell you when I come and lock up what's been reported in the past. You just see what you find. And the suggestion that the power of suggestion is very positive, and there is some evidence of that. But I think it's best to know what's been reported there before, for the reason I said, that you might pick up something that if you didn't know, you wouldn't even make a note of.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be good for the economy as well, as the paranormal's got very popular if you can lean towards them doing it.
Yeah.
As your basis. I know you said, well, Martin's quite right. I'm a great believer in knowing as much as possible about locations, history, and ghost stories, as it can help you tell your questions, etc.
Yeah.
We tend to delve into the history of places, right? Obviously, hence our name. This current location, we didn't really. We had a quick look, at history, and it was built then by so and so, and that was it. Off we went. And we were quite lucky to meet some of the residents, and they gave us a wee bit of background and what have you to the place as well. But since it's after investigations that we've started to dig more, because we've still got a lot. We're going to be investigating right through October, November there. But as you say, Mark, about people learning about a place and they get height, it's like Greyfriars. You get anybody going to Greyfriars, everybody knows about Greyfriars, so they go there with this expectation that they're going to see something, they're going to be attacked or something, but and they'll go in and it could be a squirrel in a tree.
Yes.
And they'll say, oh, I went to Greyfriars and I heard a stone getting thrown.
Yeah.
And to me, that can make them think things are happening. I mean, I've been to Greyfriars hundreds of times and never had anything happen.
No.
And I know the history of the place,
Yeah.
They just get this hype and but Greyfriars, we're going to get some activity and what have you. And I think that can do more damage than good.
Well, also as well, what you've got. This is basically how a lot of folklore can start. You'll have a story, and it gets told to somebody else, who tells it to somebody else, and they add a fact, or they add something that makes it a little bit more of an interesting story, and then somebody does the same and adds something else, and it's the Chinese whispers effect. When you actually this story has been passed on for 300 years. How it started 300 years ago is nothing like it is now. You know, it's much more dramatic. Yeah.
It's like the old joke. I don't know if you haven't done it up here, you know, working in a warehouse, if Harry hits his thumb on a Monday with a hammer, come Friday, by the time he's got a broken leg.
Yeah.
You know, by the time the story's moved around the warehouse, the guy's broke his leg, then Harry walks in with a plaster on his thumb. Oh, I get told you broke your leg.
Yeah.
You're not hitting a hammer, you know. Chad, we were talking about this last night as well, Finn. What do you think about using music from their time?
Yes. Yeah. That's called the Singapore theory, I think, is the technical term. I don't know why it's got that name, but this theory of, for instance, going to an old World War II airfield and playing Glenn Miller music or music of that era, that's known as the Singapore theory, I believe. And I've done that in various houses. We've tried that before with varying degrees of success. But I think it's, you know, if you've got the facilities to do that, try anything. You want to try and solicit paranormal activity. So if you think music of the era that was associated with that place will work. So yeah, you know, get a Glenn Miller swing band going on an old Second World War airfield or something like that. I remember somebody doing a similar experiment in the aircraft hangars at I can't remember the name of the place. There's a place in Lincolnshire, an old Second World War. It's a museum now, and I think most haunted investigated there very early on in their careers, and they had an investigation, and they played music from the Second World War, and they had quite a lot of activity. And it was somebody that I knew, and you know, they were very authentic, and they said yes, you know, we did get something from doing that. But yeah, that's what I think it's called. It's the Singapore theory. I don't know whether that's because somebody in Singapore came up with the idea that if you actually played music of the era, that it would evoke memories for the spirits, and they'd come out to play, if you like.
Yeah. Martin's made a good point. I'll just come out in a wee second. But just what you're saying there, Mark, about, you know, trying different things. I think you do need to think outside the box, because I know we're doing it. We're going to start to do it. You know, you got these ghost teams, no disrespect to them, but they're going and they've got the usual, you know, the K2. As we do it as well, as we use it. But we're Chinese, we're trying a compass, and it might sound nuts if we say it, come up with the idea. We're trying, it's a bit of old clothesline, and I cut up a t-shirt, hang the material for the t-shirt, and you do it now where you guarantee there's no draft, and they hang it up and you ask the spirits to walk by it, if we put a candle underneath it, which shows that there is no draft. So if a candle burns through and the material moves, you know, you've got something. Martin made a good point there, and we've spoken about this a few times, laughing and joking. Laughing and having a good time, sorry, always good. My way of thinking this, Mark, is that, again, you get ghost groups who go there and they're very serious. They're very good at doing their various bits. But then you get groups who go there, they still take it serious, they're still doing their various, but the atmosphere's a lot lighter, because they're having a wee laugh, not at the spirits, but they're having a wee a wee joke amongst ourselves. I feel that would bring spirit out more.
I think ultimately, if you try and put yourself into their shoes, somebody's coming along and trying to communicate with them. They don't know who you are, just as much as you don't know who they are. So logically speaking, they would distrust you as much as you distrust them. If they see people that are laughing and joking and appear to be no threat to you, then probably it'd be the same if you walked into a pub and there was sort of two tables of men, and one side of the table were laughing and joking and making you feel very welcome, and on the other side the people were looking at you sort of daggers, and that you'd probably steer towards the others. So it's possible. Yeah, we've done it before. We've tried to constantly provide assurances. We don't wish you any harm. We're just really curious to know your story. Will you tell us it? And so on and so forth, and then get information that can be actually verified or looked into as best you can, because that's the information that's gold dust. If that all checks out, then it's highly likely, I think most of us would say, that the other stuff that we're told is likely to be accurate, that's not so easy to check out.
Mm-hmm. Just one last question before we wind it up. Do you think in any investigation it's important to have a plan, or do you think it's better to take it as it comes?
I generally have an investigation plan. If I'm going somewhere specifically, I have a plan of how many people are going. An average investigation that I do would probably be 8 to 12 people. Hinchinbrook in December might be a little bit more because it's such a big house. So you need to have a plan so that, let's say you've got 12 people and you decide to split in two groups of two. You don't want those people investigating in rooms next to one another. So you'd have a plan where you'd say, right, from 8 till 9, Team A are going to be in this part of the building here. Team B are going to be in this part of the building. So we keep noise contaminated. Then we can just swap over. And so it's an idea to have a plan, but I think you've got to have the flexibility that you might have to abandon that plan at any time, because you don't know what's going to happen. So, it's all the best plans and all that laid is all very good. But certainly it's wise to have a plan purely for the geography of the building. And that's how I was taught to do it. Was, if you've got two teams, you try and get them to both investigate the same room at different times. And at the same time, as you're going through the course of the evening, you try to keep those two teams as far apart as possible. So just basically to avoid noise contamination, we do carry a walkie-talkie radio so that if we get something, we can communicate with the other group, the other end of the house or whatever, and say, look, we've just heard this, was it you? And they'll know whether they were moving around or whether they were still. So that can be useful. But you'll also find that with a walkie-talkie system like that, they very often trigger electronic devices that you've got. So
That's
got a record or something there, it goes berserk as soon as you start transmitting.
That's the danger. Well, on that note, we'll that's with tours, over tours we've been on. We'll wind it up there. So I'll hang on to you just for a wee second after we come off, Mark, if that's all right. Just want to say thanks to everybody that came out of the chat for your questions and your comments. They're all much appreciated, and big thanks to Mark for taking his time to come in. We're back tomorrow night with Jim Martin, who is the founder of the Spiritual Realm Network in America. He was with us a couple of weeks ago. He's coming back in tonight. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Justin. And we've got a special surprise guest coming in tomorrow night. We'll not tell you because then it'll not be a surprise. But we're back at 9 o'clock tomorrow night anyway. And thanks again to Mark and to everybody in the chat, and take care. And we'll see you again tomorrow night, hopefully. So take care for now, folks. Bye. Bye. Thanks, Penny and Martin.